And when I told people that I was researching Jews and alcohol, everyone's like, what's there to talk about? There's no history of Jews and alcohol. And I believe that this stems from a misconception that Jews don't drink. Not that literally Jews don't drink at all, but that people will think that that's not our vice. They'll think about things like overeating. I heard a good joke recently. I'll tell it to you very briefly. Why don't Jews drink? Because it dulls the pain. So anyway, but the idea, obviously jokes come from somewhere, and the idea that anybody would even make a joke about why Jews don't drink suggests that people believe that Jews don't drink. Now, I'm going to start sharing my screen now, and what I basically want you to realize is that I knew this was wrong, not just because I have many friends who drink, I enjoy drinking, but I just knew that there had to be a lot more because I know that, one second there, that Jews do drink. And I started to research, and I just didn't realize how wrong I was or how wrong these people were. I started to uncover more and more and more points of intersection between Jews and alcohol throughout history, some of which were extremely surprising to me. So I'm going to throw out quickly just 3 surprises that we're going to come back to, but hopefully that'll keep you interested for the whole lecture. So first of all, I uncovered a couple of genuinely Jewish alcoholic beverages, not just things that we drink like other people do, like wine, for example, but 2 genuinely Jewish beverages, alcoholic beverages. Secondly, you think about wine in France and beer in Germany, 2 major European countries with major beverages that are associated with them. From their outset, Jews have been intimately involved in those 2 industries, and in both cases, the Jews pushed them forward into the modern era. And perhaps the most surprising to me was that at one point in history, approximately 25% of all of the Jews in the world, 1 in 4 Jews approximately, were involved in the alcohol industry, which to me blew my mind. So we're going to get back to all of this. Now, that word for wine, or the substance wine, appears very frequently, 16 times, which is a fairly showing a pattern, in a classic trio of digancha, tiroshcha, v'yitzharecha. Grain, grapes, and oil. And what these 3 foods or foodstuffs do is they form the classic Mediterranean triad. These 3 substances were the core of the Mediterranean diet from antiquity. Most of the nutrients that people received in their diets, most of the calories, came from these 3 things, primarily from the grain, but also with grapes and oil as well. And so it makes sense. And we see this, and specifically the importance of wine, archaeologically as well. In the land of Israel here, first of all, at Tel Kabri up in north and at Giv'on, just outside of Yerushalayim, they found 2 massive industrial-sized ancient wine production facilities. In Tel Kabri, it goes back 3,700 years, pre-Israelite, whereas in Giv'on, it's from the period of Yehoshua through the United Monarchy. But the bottom line is that this was a massive industry. So it wasn't just about nutrients. It was a massive commercial industry as well. But wine, now the most important rabbinic innovation, Talmudic innovation regarding wine for this talk is the fact that the rabbis placed wine specifically as a separator between Jews and non-Jews, and made the idea that you're not allowed to drink wine that has been handled by a non-Jew. And they extended it many other times, and also post-Talmudic, there are even further extensions. The idea, though, being that it was consciously recognized as an exceptional beverage, that boundaries fall down when you're drinking, and thus they explicitly said that the reason they instituted it is because it might lead to intermarriage, which then might lead to avodah zarah, to idol worship. And so because they placed it as this separator, what becomes throughout history, and what we're going to see, is that it our relationship with alcohol lies at a meeting point on the frontier between the Jews and the non-Jews throughout history. So, to sum up, so far, the rabbis recognized alcohol as an exceptional beverage. Because of that, we typically engage in it via the lens of religion and ritual. And because the rabbis placed it as this separator between the Jews and the non-Jews, it becomes it sits at the frontier. So now we're going to look how our relationship morphs with alcohol from place to place throughout history and reflects our relationships with non-Jews in each of those places. And so moving into the diaspora, particularly already from early times, from the Roman exile, Jews spread around the Mediterranean and took with us the knowledge of wine cultivation. Partially, and especially as we go through the centuries and we have more and more regulations that require kosher wine, that's the main reason. If we're going to need kosher wine in these places, we need to grow it. But even before the Talmud, we have numerous examples that we know of historically of Jews becoming the cultivators of grapes in the countries they moved to throughout the Mediterranean region. And we had the knowledge from Israel previously, and we just took that with us, and the love of wine. I want to start by looking at the country of Italy, one of the earliest exile communities. There were Jews living in Rome and Italy from at least the 2nd century BCE, if not earlier. So that's quite a long history there, long before the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, etc. And it is probable, although we don't have definite proof, that they were involved in viticulture early. Certainly by the Middle Ages, we have proof that the Jews in Italy were heavily involved in wine production. But to me, one of the most interesting elements or aspects of the history of Jews and wine in Italy is a later one. It stems from the 1500s, so just at the dawning of the modern age. That in Italy, the rabbis there actually permitted, or at least some rabbis there actually permitted the Jews of Italy to drink what's known as stam yenam. That means wine that is touched by non-Jews, not wine that was literally used for worship purposes, just regular wine that was touched, which most Jews around the world, and certainly today, that are observant would not drink. And this became a cause célèbre. Rabbis around the world were questioning, like, how can you do this? And this is wrong, etc. To me, the point is not even to discuss whether you can or can't, but why is it that it's in Italy, of all places, that this rabbinic decision comes about? And in my opinion, perhaps this shows how integrated the Jews were. They were already living amongst the non-Jews in that area for 1,700 years. Living side by side, often very integrated, getting along, and yet not assimilating. And so maybe the rabbis looked at it and said, okay, maybe we don't need this separator anymore because obviously we're not integrating and we're not assimilating. So perhaps that's the reason that it was the rabbis there that permitted stam yenam.